At 4:40 in the morning on August 3rd, Kīlauea Volcano on Hawaii's Big Island came roaring back to life. It sent lava fountains bursting more than 650 feet into the sky from the north vent inside Hawaii crater. A plume of ash and volcanic gas climbed over 20,000 feet above Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. That alone would be a solid story on any given day. But what made this specific eruption genuinely historic wasn't just the height of the fountains. It was the number attached to it, episode 48. And with that single episode, Kīlauea officially broke a record that had stood untouched for 40 years, becoming the most episodic lava fountaining eruption ever documented on Earth. And here's the part that should really get your attention. As of this recording, the volcano hasn't shown a single sign of slowing down. I want to walk you through exactly how this eruption built to a record-breaking moment, why scientists are describing it as genuinely unprecedented, and what's actually driving a volcano to erupt in this strange, rhythmic, episodic pattern instead of just erupting once and settling into a steady flow the way most people picture a volcano behaving. Stick with me to the end, because there's a detail buried in the seismic data from the record-breaking episode itself that has scientists watching the ground beneath the crater rim very closely right now. And if you want to be here for whatever episode comes next, subscribe to Nemora Proof before we get into it. Let's go. Let me start with the basic timeline, because the scale of what's actually happened here only makes sense once you see the full arc of it. Kilauea's current eruption began on December 23, 2024, inside the volcano's summit caldera, within a crater called Halemaumau, part of a larger caldera known as Kīlauea. From that first eruption onward, Kīlauea has behaved in a way that's genuinely unusual, even by the standards of an active volcano. Rather than producing one continuous outpouring of lava, it's been erupting in distinct numbered episodes. Each one is a burst of intense fountaining followed by a pause, then another burst, then another pause. That's repeating in a rhythm that's held remarkably steady for over a year and a half now. By the time episode 40 occurred on January 12th of this year, fountains were reaching roughly 800 feet into the sky over the course of just under 10 hours. The eruption kept going from there, episode after episode, through the spring, until episode 48 arrived on June 1st and made history. Here's the number that matters most in this entire story, and I want to give it to you precisely, because precision is exactly what a record like this deserves. The previous record for the most fountaining episodes ever documented at a single eruption was 47. That record was set by the legendary Pu-o-o eruption, which ran continuously on Kilauea's East Rift Zone from 1983 to 1986. It became one of the most iconic and closely studied volcanic events in Hawaii's modern history. It took that eruption roughly 3.5 years to accumulate those 47 episodes. Kilauea's current eruption matched and then surpassed that exact count in about a year and a half, roughly half the time. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the current eruption has been producing a new episode of fountaining roughly once every 10 days. That's a pace considerably faster than the historic eruption it just dethroned. I want to pause on that comparison for a second, because I think it's the single most important detail in this whole story. This isn't simply a volcano erupted a lot of times. This is a specific, unusual eruptive style, episodic fountaining with pauses in between, being sustained at a pace that outstrips the previous record holder by a significant margin. And it's doing so in front of live cameras, scientific instruments, and hundreds of thousands of visitors to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, in an era where nothing about it goes undocumented. The Pu-o-o eruption became legendary, partly because of how long it lasted, and partly because of how well it ended up being studied over its multi-year run. This current eruption is achieving a similar level of scientific significance in a fraction of the time. So let's talk about the mechanism, because episodic fountaining isn't just a stylistic quirk of this particular volcano. It's a specific, well-understood, but genuinely fascinating physical process. Understanding it explains why Kīlauea keeps doing this instead of simply erupting continuously the way some volcanoes do. Beneath Kilauea's summit sits a shallow magma reservoir. The eruption is being fed by that reservoir through a conduit connecting it to the surface. In an episodic fountaining eruption like this one, gas trapped within the rising magma plays the central role. As magma pushes upward toward the surface, dissolved gas within it begins to come out of solution. That's the same basic physics as opening a bottle of carbonated soda and watching bubbles rush upward as pressure drops. When enough gas accumulates and separates from the magma in the shallow conduit, it can build toward a threshold where the whole system releases in a burst. That burst drives lava explosively upward into a fount that can reach hundreds of feet into the air. Once that burst of gas and lava has been released, pressure in the system drops, and the fountaining stops. The volcano enters a pause, sometimes lasting days, while pressure and gas content rebuild in the shallow system below. That sets the stage for the next episode. Scientists actually track this rebuilding process directly, and it gives them a genuinely useful forecasting tool for predicting roughly when the next episode will occur. Using instruments called tilt meters, which measure extremely small changes in the tilt of the ground's surface, researchers can watch the summit area slowly inflate between episodes. That inflation happens as magma and pressure build back up beneath the crater. During one recent pause between episodes, instruments recorded nearly 15 microradians of inflationary tilt in the weeks following the previous fountaining episode. That kind of measurable ground deformation is exactly what allows scientists to issue forecasts predicting a roughly 10-day window for when the next episode is likely to begin. That's well before any lava is actually visible at the surface. Now, here's the detail from the record-breaking episode itself that I think deserves real attention. It's the part of the story that's actually still unfolding and being actively studied right now. As episode 48 was ending on June 1st, something happened beneath the south rim of Halemaumau that wasn't part of the normal pattern. The U.S. Geological Survey recorded 53 earthquakes, most of them smaller than magnitude 2. They occurred at shallow depths of up to about a mile below the surface, clustered specifically beneath that south rim area. And alongside that earthquake swarm, an area along the south rim of the crater physically rose by several inches. When you put those two observations together, a burst of shallow, small earthquakes paired with measurable ground uplift in the same location, you're looking at exactly the kind of signature that typically points to magma actively moving through the shallow subsurface. The U.S. Geological Survey has been direct about this, describing the specific cause of that uplift as still uncertain, but they note it could very plausibly be related to magma movement beneath that part of the crater rim. That's genuinely one of the more interesting open questions in this whole ongoing story right now. Not whether Kīlauea's overall eruption will continue, since the pattern of that has been remarkably consistent for over a year and a half, but whether this specific south rim activity represents the beginning of some new phase or vent configuration within the broader eruption. I also want to address something that came up in the days just before this record-breaking episode. It's exactly the kind of detail that tends to get misconstrued into something scarier than it actually is. On May 23rd, just days before episode 48 broke the 40-year record, a magnitude 6.0 earthquake shook the Hawaiian Islands. It would be easy to assume that earthquake was somehow connected to the record-breaking eruption that followed so closely afterward, part of the same escalating volcanic story. But the actual scientific explanation is more interesting, and it has nothing to do with Kīlauea's magma system directly. That magnitude 6.0 earthquake was likely caused by the sheer physical weight of the entire Hawaiian island chain bending the oceanic plate beneath the seafloor. That's a completely separate geological process from the magma-driven activity happening within Kīlauea's summit itself. The Hawaiian Islands are enormous accumulations of volcanic rock sitting on oceanic crust. That immense weight genuinely does flex and stress the plate beneath it over geological time. It occasionally produces earthquakes through that bending mechanism entirely independent of any specific volcano's eruptive activity. So while the timing looked dramatic, back-to-back with a record-breaking eruption, the actual mechanism connecting the two is best described as coincidental proximity in time, rather than a causal chain where one triggered the other. And let's talk about where things stand as of the most recent data, because this eruption genuinely hasn't stopped rewriting its own record since June 1st. By June 27th, episode 50 had occurred, running for 7 hours with fountains reaching 300 meters, roughly 984 feet, into the sky. That's an even more powerful showing than the record-breaking episode 48 just weeks earlier. That means, in less than a month after breaking the 40-year record, Kīlauea had already added 2 additional episodes on top of it. It's continuing the exact rhythm that's defined this eruption since December 2024. The U.S. Geological Survey has been unambiguous in its assessment of where this stands. The ongoing summit eruption is already an event for the history books. It's one that's garnered worldwide attention specifically because of how visible and accessible it's been to the public throughout its record-breaking run. And there's no sign the volcano is ready to go quiet. More episodes may still lie ahead. Researchers have noted, with what reads as genuine scientific wonder, that years from now, today's kids will likely be telling their own grandchildren about these fountains. That's the same way past generations have passed down stories of the legendary Pu-o-u eruption this one just surpassed. I want to be honest about the scale of this eruption relative to Kīlauea's broader eruptive history too, because context matters here. This is not the most voluminous or most destructive eruption Kīlauea has produced in recent memory. The dramatic 2018 eruption, which sent lava flowing through residential neighborhoods in the Puna district and ultimately caused Kīlauea's summit to partially collapse, remains a far more destructive event in terms of property loss and displaced communities. What makes this current eruption historically significant isn't the volume of lava or the damage caused. It's the sheer number of discrete, powerful fountaining episodes sustained over an extended period. That's a specific eruptive style being repeated with a consistency and frequency that had never been documented before at any volcano, anywhere, in the entire scientific record. Here's the practical situation for anyone actually planning to visit or currently living near the affected area. I think this is genuinely useful information that a lot of the more dramatic coverage skips over. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park has remained open throughout this entire eruption. Park officials have been explicit that there's no reason for travelers to cancel planned trips to the Big Island because of it. When fountaining is actively occurring, viewing areas like the Kīlauea Overlook, roughly a half-mile walk from the parking area on Crater Rim Drive, offer public access to watch the eruption safely from a designated distance. And even during the pause phases between episodes, which, given the roughly 10-day rhythm, make up the majority of any given visit, the caldera itself typically still glows visibly from recent activity, especially at night. That makes the rim viewing areas worth a visit regardless of whether an active fountaining episode happens to be underway during your specific trip. The primary safety concerns during active episodes involve elevated volcanic gas levels and tephra, small glass particles carried in the eruption plume that can irritate skin and eyes. There's also reduced visibility and increased traffic near the park during active fountaining. That's exactly the kind of practical detail that matters far more to anyone actually visiting than it does to a scary headline. So let me bring this all together, because I think the honest, complete version of this story captures something genuinely remarkable about watching a scientific record get broken in real time. Kīlauea has been erupting episodically since December 2024, in a rhythm driven by gas building up and periodically releasing from a shallow magma system beneath its summit. On August 13rd, that eruption's 48th episode officially surpassed a 40-year-old record set by the legendary Pu'u-o-o eruption of the 1980s. It accomplished in roughly a year and a half what took that previous record holder 3.5 years. As of the most recent data, episode 50 has already come and gone. Scientists are watching a fresh pattern of shallow earthquakes and ground uplift beneath the crater's south rim that may represent the next chapter in an eruption that shows no signs of concluding. This is, by the U.S. Geological Survey's own description, a genuine event for the history books. It's unfolding in a place accessible enough that ordinary visitors can watch scientific history happen from a public overlook in a national park. Before you go, I want to ask you something, because I think Kilauea's current eruption raises a genuinely interesting question about how we experience natural records being broken. If you've ever watched an eruption like this, whether in person from one of those overlooks or just through the USGS livestream footage, does knowing you were watching an actual documented world record unfold in real-time change how you experienced it? Drop a comment and tell me, because I think there's something genuinely special about a natural process this dramatic playing out in full public view. That's instead of being reconstructed after the fact from old data, the way most historic eruptions before the era of live-streamed volcano cameras had to be studied. If this gave you a clearer, more complete picture of what's actually happening at Kīlauea right now, hit that like button. It genuinely helps careful, accurate breakdowns like this one reach more people, instead of the version that just chases the scariest possible framing. Subscribe to Nemora Proof so you're here for whatever episode comes next. Because based on everything the data is showing right now, this eruption is very much not finished writing its own record. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.